Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to take you inside a world that few of us will ever see. The daily life of inmates on Texas death row, housed in the Allan B. Polunsky Unit in Livingston, Texas. This maximum security facility is known not only for the severity of crimes committed by its residents, but also for the intensity of life behind its walls. The Allan B. Polunsky Unit is a maximum security prison located near Livingston, Texas, and it serves a very specific and highly controlled purpose within the Texas criminal justice system. It is the primary facility that houses male inmates sentenced to death. Unlike general population prisons, the Polunsky Unit is designed almost entirely around containment, risk prevention, and long-term isolation. Every structural decision, policy, and daily procedure reflects the reality that the men held here have been convicted of the most serious crimes under Texas law and are awaiting execution. This unit became the permanent home of Texas death row in 1999 after authorities decided that housing death-sentenced inmates elsewhere posed too many security risks. Since then, Polunsky has functioned as both a holding facility and a waiting space, a place where time stretches indefinitely while legal appeals move slowly through the courts. Some inmates remain here for only a few years, while others spend decades inside the same cell, making the prison not just a site of punishment, but one of prolonged psychological endurance. The location itself plays an important role in the prison's function. Situated in a rural area, far from major cities, the unit is physically removed from public view, reinforcing the separation between death row inmates and society at large. This isolation mirrors the inmate's internal reality, cut off from normal social life, employment, education programs, and meaningful interaction. The prison is heavily guarded, monitored by surveillance systems, and staffed by officers trained specifically to manage high-risk inmates under extreme security conditions. The purpose of the Polunsky Unit goes beyond incarceration. It represents the final stage of the criminal justice process for those sentenced to death in Texas. In this sense, it exists at the intersection of law, punishment, and morality. The unit enforces the sentence handed down by the courts while maintaining strict order and control, ensuring that inmates remain alive to face their legal fate, whether that is execution, sentence reversal, or natural death while still confined. Daily life inside the Allan B. Polunsky Unit follows a rigid, repetitive routine that is built almost entirely around isolation and control. For inmates on Texas death row, each day is nearly identical to the one before it, with little variation to mark the passage of time. Prisoners typically spend 22 to 23 hours a day confined to their cells, emerging only for brief, tightly supervised moments such as showers, limited recreation, or medical visits. This extreme lack of movement and interaction defines every aspect of their existence. The day often begins early, with lights coming on and guards conducting security checks through the solid steel doors. Meals are delivered through narrow slots in the cell doors, ensuring that inmates never eat together and rarely see another person face to face. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner arrive at fixed times, reinforcing a sense of order, but also reminding inmates of their complete dependence on the institution for even the most basic needs. Any time spent outside the cell is carefully scheduled and strictly controlled. Recreation, when permitted, usually takes place alone in a small, enclosed yard often referred to as a recreation cage. There is no group exercise, no sports, and no conversation with other inmates. Showers are also taken individually, under constant supervision, and are limited in duration. Even these brief breaks from confinement emphasize how tightly every movement is monitored. Because inmates are not allowed to work, attend group programs, or participate in educational activities, large portions of the day pass in silence. Many inmates develop personal routines to cope with the monotony, reading, writing letters, praying, or exercising within the limited space of their cells. Still, the repetitive schedule and absence of meaningful activity can distort a person's sense of time, making days feel endless and years blur together. This strict daily routine serves the prison's primary goal of security, minimizing the possibility of conflict, escape, or harm. At the same time, it highlights the psychological weight of life on death row, where the routine itself becomes a form of punishment, reinforcing isolation, uncertainty, and a constant awareness of one's sentence. The solitary conditions inside the Allan B. Polunsky Unit define the physical reality of life on Texas death row. Each inmate is housed alone in a small cell measuring roughly 60 square feet, a space designed for containment rather than comfort. The cell is constructed of concrete and steel, with solid walls on all sides and a heavy metal door that separates the inmate from the rest of the facility. A narrow window or slit allows limited natural light, but offers little to no view of the outside world, reinforcing a sense of separation and confinement. Inside the cell, furnishings are minimal and strictly functional. A fixed metal bed with a thin mattress, a combination toilet and sink made of stainless steel, and a small writing surface or shelf make up nearly the entire living environment. There is no personal decoration beyond a limited number of approved items, such as books, letters, or religious materials. Televisions and radios are typically not allowed, leaving inmates without common distractions that exist in other prison units. The design of these cells serves a clear purpose: to reduce risk and maintain control. Solid doors limit sound and visibility, preventing communication between inmates and reducing the possibility of coordinated disturbances. Movement in and out of the cell is rare and always supervised, with inmates restrained during transport. Even conversations with correctional officers are brief and often conducted through the door, emphasizing the physical and emotional distance between staff and prisoners. Living under such solitary conditions for extended periods has a profound impact on how inmates experience space and time. With no shared living areas, no communal activities, and almost no physical contact with others, the cell becomes the center of an inmate's entire world. Over months and years, the lack of stimulation and social interaction can heighten feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and sensory deprivation, making the physical confinement inseparable from its psychological effects. Isolation is one of the most defining features of life on Texas death row at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit. Inmates are not only physically separated from the outside world, but also socially cut off from nearly all forms of human interaction. Unlike prisoners in the general population, death row inmates do not live, eat, work, or exercise with others. Every aspect of their daily existence is structured to keep them alone, reinforcing a constant state of separation that extends far beyond simple confinement. Contact with other inmates is virtually non-existent. Cells are designed to prevent communication, with solid doors and limited visibility. Inmates cannot see or speak freely with one another, and any attempt at interaction is quickly restricted by prison staff. There are no shared recreational spaces, classrooms, or dining halls. Even when inmates are taken out of their cells for showers or recreation, they are moved individually, often restrained, ensuring that they never cross paths in a meaningful way. Visits from family members are also heavily restricted. When visits do occur, they usually take place behind thick glass, using phones to communicate. Physical contact is not allowed, eliminating simple human gestures such as handshakes or hugs. For many inmates, especially those whose families live far away or cannot afford frequent travel, months or even years may pass without seeing a loved one in person. Over time, relationships weaken, and inmates may feel forgotten or disconnected from the lives they once knew. Interaction with correctional officers is limited and strictly professional. Conversations are brief, task-focused, and often conducted through the cell door. Officers are trained to maintain emotional distance for safety reasons, which further reduces opportunities for normal social exchange. Medical staff, attorneys, and chaplains may provide occasional contact, but even these interactions are scheduled, monitored, and short in duration. This level of isolation creates an environment where silence becomes a constant presence. With no casual conversation, no shared experiences, and no sense of community, Inmates are left alone with their thoughts for most of the day and night. Over long periods, this absence of social interaction can reshape how individuals think, feel, and perceive reality, making isolation not just a condition of imprisonment, but a central part of the punishment itself. The psychological impact of living on death row at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit is profound and long-lasting, shaped by extreme isolation, uncertainty, and the constant awareness of a death sentence. Inmates are not only confined physically, but are also placed under intense mental pressure that builds over time, knowing that execution is a possible outcome, even if years or decades away, creates a persistent state of anxiety that influences every thought and emotion. One of the most damaging factors is prolonged solitary confinement. Spending nearly all day alone in a small cell with minimal stimulation can disrupt normal cognitive and emotional functioning. Many inmates report difficulty concentrating, memory problems, heightened irritability, and severe mood swings. Without regular social interaction, the mind often turns inward, amplifying fear, regret, guilt, or anger. Thoughts may loop endlessly, with no external distractions to interrupt them. The uncertainty of the legal process further deepens the psychological strain. Appeals can take years, and inmates often live in a state of limbo, never knowing whether their sentence will be overturned, delayed, or carried out. Execution dates may be scheduled and then postponed, forcing inmates to repeatedly prepare themselves mentally for death. This cycle of hope and despair can be emotionally exhausting and destabilizing. Depression is common among death row inmates, fueled by isolation, loss of purpose, and separation from family. With no opportunity to work, pursue education, or meaningfully contribute to daily prison life, many inmates struggle with feelings of worthlessness and emotional numbness. Some turn to religion, writing, or strict personal routines as coping mechanisms, while others withdraw further into silence. Over long periods, the lack of normal human interaction can alter how inmates relate to people altogether. Simple conversations may become difficult, emotional expression may be dulled, and trust in others may erode. The psychological effects of death row confinement are not sudden or dramatic, but slow and cumulative, shaping the inmate's inner world day by day under constant isolation and uncertainty. Security is the central principle governing every aspect of life at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, and it shapes how the prison operates on a daily basis. Because the facility houses individuals convicted of the most serious crimes and sentenced to death, maintaining strict control is viewed as essential. Every rule, movement, and interaction is designed to minimize risk, prevent violence, and ensure that inmates remain securely contained at all times. The physical layout of the unit reflects this priority. Thick concrete walls, reinforced steel doors, surveillance cameras, and controlled corridors limit visibility and movement throughout the facility. Cells are designed to prevent tampering, self-harm, or communication between inmates. Doors are remotely operated, allowing officers to manage movement without direct contact, reducing the chance of confrontation or escape attempts. Inmate movement is rare and carefully coordinated. When an inmate leaves his cell for any reason, whether for recreation, a shower, medical care, or a legal visit, he is typically restrained and escorted by multiple officers. Routes are cleared in advance to avoid contact with others, and timing is staggered to maintain complete separation. Even small deviations from routine are treated as potential security threats. Correctional officers assigned to death row receive specialized training to manage high-risk inmates under extreme conditions. They are taught to maintain constant awareness, follow strict procedures, and limit personal engagement with prisoners. This professional distance is not only a matter of discipline, but also a safety measure, ensuring that boundaries remain clear and predictable in a highly controlled environment. Security protocols also govern communication, property, and privileges. Items allowed in cells are limited and closely inspected. Mail is monitored, and phone calls are regulated. Every aspect of an inmate's life is subject to oversight, reinforcing the idea that control is continuous and absolute. In this environment, security is not simply a feature of the prison. It is the foundation upon which the entire system operates. Meal delivery on Texas death row at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit reflects the same strict control and isolation that define every other aspect of daily life. Unlike prisons where inmates gather in dining halls or eat together in shared spaces, death row inmates receive all of their meals alone inside their cells. Food is delivered through a small slot in the solid steel door, ensuring there is no direct contact between inmates and staff and no interaction with other prisoners. Meals arrive on a fixed schedule, reinforcing the rigid routine that structures each day. Trays are passed through the door slot by correctional officers, who remain alert and cautious during the process. Once the meal is delivered, the slot is closed, and the inmate eats in complete isolation, often in silence. Afterward, trays are collected in the same manner, one cell at a time, maintaining separation and minimizing movement. The food itself is basic and standardized, designed to meet nutritional requirements rather than provide comfort or enjoyment. Portions, menus, and meal times are regulated, leaving inmates with no choice or control over what or when they eat. This lack of autonomy, even in something as fundamental as food, reinforces the total dependence of inmates on the institution. Eating alone day after day can have a psychological effect as well. In most societies, meals are social moments, opportunities for conversation, connection, and shared experience. On death row, those social elements are completely absent. Over time, meals become just another reminder of isolation, marking the passage of hours rather than offering relief or comfort. Meal delivery also serves a security function. By eliminating shared dining spaces, the prison reduces the risk of conflict, contraband exchange, or coordinated disruptions. The process is efficient, controlled, and impersonal, reflecting the broader philosophy of death row confinement where safety and order take precedence over social interaction or personal choice. The harsh conditions at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit are closely tied to its history and the decisions that led to Texas death row being relocated there. Before 1999, male death row inmates were housed at the Ellis Unit, where conditions were less restrictive and allowed for more movement and interaction. However, a serious security incident, including an escape attempt involving a death row inmate, raised major concerns about safety and control within the system. In response, Texas prison officials sought a facility that could provide far stricter containment. The Polunsky Unit, originally designed to hold high-security inmates, was chosen because of its reinforced structure, remote location, and capacity for extreme isolation. When death row was transferred there, the unit was adapted specifically to eliminate the risks that had existed in previous facilities. This decision marked a turning point in how Texas managed its most condemned prisoners. Following the move, conditions became significantly tougher. Policies were rewritten to restrict inmate movement, eliminate group activities, and enforce near-total solitary confinement. The emphasis shifted almost entirely toward preventing escape, violence, or disruption, even if it meant removing privileges that existed elsewhere. Over time, these policies became standard practice, shaping the daily reality of death row life at Polunsky. The unit's reputation as one of the harshest death row facilities in the United States grew as these conditions remained in place year after year. Unlike other states that gradually introduced reforms or eased restrictions, Texas maintained a strict approach, arguing that the seriousness of the crimes and the risks involved justified the conditions. As legal challenges and public debate increased, the Polunsky Unit became a symbol of Texas's firm stance on capital punishment. This history explains why life on death row at Polunsky is not just restrictive, but intentionally severe. The conditions are the result of past security failures, policy decisions, and a philosophy that prioritizes absolute control, making the unit a lasting example of how historical events can shape the present realities of incarceration. The perspectives of inmates and their families offer a deeply personal view of life on death row at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, revealing emotional struggles that extend far beyond the prison walls. While inmates endure isolation and confinement, their families experience a different but equally heavy burden, one marked by worry, grief, and a constant sense of uncertainty. The documentary highlights how a death sentence affects not just the individual incarcerated, but an entire network of loved ones. For inmates, limited opportunities to share their stories or express their emotions make communication with family especially important. Letters, monitored phone calls, and rare visits become lifelines to the outside world. However, these connections are fragile. Conversations are time-restricted, carefully supervised, and often emotionally charged, as both sides are aware that each interaction could be one of the last. Inmates may struggle to maintain a sense of identity as fathers, sons, or brothers while confined in such extreme conditions. Families face long travel distances, strict visitation rules, and emotional stress each time they visit the unit. Seeing a loved one behind thick glass, unable to touch or comfort them, can be painful and disorienting. Many families describe feelings of helplessness, knowing they cannot change the conditions or outcome, yet still carrying hope through ongoing appeals. Financial strain, social stigma, and emotional exhaustion often become part of their daily lives. The passage of time further complicates these relationships. Years spent on death row can weaken family bonds, especially when children grow up or parents age while an inmate remains confined. Some families remain steadfast in their support, while others drift away, overwhelmed by the emotional toll. Inmates often feel guilt for the pain their situation causes, adding another layer of psychological strain to their confinement. These perspectives humanize the death row experience by showing how punishment extends beyond the individual sentence. The emotional weight carried by both inmates and families reveals the far-reaching consequences of life on death row, where isolation and uncertainty affect not only those inside the cells, but also those waiting and hoping on the outside. The conditions at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit raise profound ethical questions about the use of solitary confinement and capital punishment in the United States. Life on death row is characterized by extreme isolation, minimal human contact, and years, sometimes decades, spent waiting under the threat of execution. These conditions prompt debate over what constitutes humane treatment and whether the system balances justice with human rights. Solitary confinement, as practiced at Polunsky, is considered by many mental health experts to be psychologically damaging. Extended isolation can lead to anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and a breakdown of normal social and cognitive functioning. Critics argue that subjecting inmates to such conditions for decades may amount to cruel and unusual punishment, regardless of the crimes for which they were convicted. The ethical concern is not simply about the legality of confinement, but about the moral responsibility of society to treat all individuals, even those convicted of serious offenses, with dignity. The death penalty itself is equally contentious. Proponents argue that it serves as a deterrent and delivers justice for the gravest crimes, providing closure for victims' families. Opponents counter that capital punishment carries risks of wrongful conviction, racial and socioeconomic bias, and disproportionate punishment. When combined with solitary confinement, death row conditions amplify the ethical stakes, forcing society to confront whether extreme punishment undermines the principles of fairness and humanity. Moreover, these conditions raise questions about rehabilitation and the purpose of incarceration. Inmates on death row have virtually no opportunity for personal growth, skill development, or meaningful social interaction, limiting any chance of transformation. Critics argue that even within a punitive framework, completely eliminating opportunities for mental and emotional engagement may be unnecessarily cruel and counterproductive to the goals of justice. Public perception and media portrayals further complicate the ethical debate. Documentaries like Daily Life Inside Texas Death Row shine a light on the lived experiences of inmates, prompting discussion about transparency, accountability, and responsibilities of the criminal justice system. They challenge audiences to consider whether maintaining absolute security and isolation justifies the significant psychological and moral costs involved. In examining life inside the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, we are confronted with a stark reality, one where security, isolation, and the weight of a death sentence define every aspect of existence. The daily routines, the physical confines of the cells, the psychological strain, and the limited human connections all paint a picture of life stripped to its bare essentials, controlled by the strictest rules. Yet, amidst the concrete and steel, the stories of inmates and their families remind us of the human dimension behind the statistics. Their experiences challenge us to reflect on the balance between justice and humanity, punishment and dignity. While the conditions at Polunsky are intended to maintain safety and order, they also raise broader ethical questions about the use of solitary confinement and the death penalty itself. Ultimately, the documentary compels us to look beyond headlines and courtrooms, to see the lives and emotions that persist within these walls, and to ask ourselves what kind of justice we, as a society, truly seek to uphold.